start recording. All right, this is the Conservation Commission meeting on Wednesday, March 16th, 2022 at 7:03. We have members Bob Shabbat, Marilyn Shriver, Peter Anderson, Carol Jordan, and Jackie Gulig. Approval of minutes of February 16th. I did send out the minutes again. I know Peter had done them. Thank you, Peter. And sent them out again today, just in case people didn't have them handy. So have people had a chance to read them?
Yeah, I have.
I hear a motion.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any discussion? Excuse me, I should have said any discussion. Corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstained?
Aye.
Okay, Jackie abstains. She wasn't here at the last meeting. Okay, thank you. Present to speak. Connie, I see that you're on the line with us. Did you want to say something tonight?
Nope, I just saw on your agenda that you had the pollinator thing and the trail steward, so I just figured I'd listen in.
Okay, great. Well, welcome.
Yep.
Finance report. Carol, anything else to report? Oh, you're muted, Carol.
No, there's no change. Nothing else been spent. I don't know if anyone attended the Board of Finance meeting, but I was unable to, and neither could Kathy. But I don't think there was anything controversial in our budget request. We're asking for the same amount as last year. Bob, you weren't there by any chance, were you?
We were both there.
We listened to part of it, but it just went on and on too long.
Okay. Fine.
Yeah, I was there when they were discussing our budget. They had no questions. They didn't even acknowledge that I was on. So didn't have any questions.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah, I figured it would be pretty straightforward. As long as we're not asking for more money, they'd be happy.
So Carol, our balance right now is still $11,122.14.
1,100, not 11,000.
Oh, excuse me. Oh,
Would
yeah.
that it were 11,000. That would be really nice.
Where's the checkbook? Get it out quick.
Yeah. We
Okay,
could,
$1,122.14. Thanks for the correction. Old business, Talmadge Estate property, nothing really to report. We just know that the survey has at least been started. It appears the field work may be finished because they seem to have boundary markers all around the boundary. So I'll check back in with Mike D'Amato to see if he's had any further conversation with the surveyors. Property management, Benton Ruby Park. Couple of things there. First of all, I want to thank a few people. Bob went out and right after our last meeting, he went out and he cleared some down trees on the Taylor Ruby connector. And then more recently went out and put some hardware cloth around a large cherry tree that the beaver had started to eat. So, Bob, did you want to say anything else about some of that work?
Oh, that wire will certainly help keep their teeth down. They won't have to chew as much.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing that.
Might be a little hard to gum those trees.
Well, I was telling Kathy, I put it on and it seems like it's secure, but you get a 40 or so pound beaver and they're incredibly strong. We'll see if that holds up.
And certainly our intention isn't to go around and cover every tree, but they had taken down a very large cherry tree next to this one. Which
Right,
is
I saw
along
that.
yeah, which is along the Taylor Pond Trail that is parallel to the Burma Road, you know, that little connector that we never really walk. And they had taken down a large cherry tree there that Patty and her husband Red went back and they cut that all up and helped with removing some of that. And then Peter and Bob Bittner, Chris and I went out and did a little work on the Julius Trail about a week ago. We went out to the gully. You know the gully where we had a bridge that rotted out as you move up from Fenton River and you go up the
Right.
hill. There was kind of
Right
like
at the top of
gully.
the hill there. Yeah.
Yeah. And somebody had actually started to use some wood that we had stockpiled there to make their own bridge crossing. They had basically put the wood down in the gully because it was wet there. So we worked on that, improved it so that it's you know, safer. It's not really a bridge, it's just a walkway above where it's wet. So that's going to need some work. And then we moved on from there and we went over to the area where trees hung up, and Peter had originally kind of rerouted the trail and put up some tape, and people eventually went in there, removed the tape, and started walking under the tree again. So we did some more work in there. Pete cut up more of the branches and such, and we kind of blocked the trail, the original trail, and marked the reroute trail. It might be good to go back in there with some blaze paint and actually make it kind of a new trail. What do you think?
Well,
Might
it's going to continue to be a new trail once that snag comes down and we can cut it up.
Yeah, we certainly could. You know, we just don't know when it's going to come down, I guess. We can just leave it flagged. We do have flags that indicate, you know, this is the new way to walk.
I would just
Well,
temporarily leave it that way.
yeah, I would too. And if someone's out there reblazing the rest of the trail anyway, and you could just work around that. But that top has been working its way down from the break point, down 3 or 4 feet from where it was originally hung up. So
Yeah.
it's sliding down as the tops of I think the branches at the top start collapsing more and rotting out. That's going to allow that trunk to slide down more and perhaps just drop in the trail. So yeah, as Bob suggested, just leave it there and we'll repaint the trail if it's there when someone goes by with the green paint.
Okay.
I would say.
Okay, oh, sounds reasonable. Then we moved on from there and there's like a 3-part boardwalk. I don't know if some of you remember that area. And there were some treads on it that were missing as well as broken. So we did the best we could with what we had to replace the board that was missing. And underneath we found the stringers there are rotting out. So we're going to have to replace those stringers at some point. That's another project we can just kind of put on the to-do list. And from there, we went down and got on the east side of the Taylor Trail and walked, and there was a tread sticking up and that Bob Bittner had mentioned, and we went back and we fixed that so it's not sticking up. But there's definitely some more treads on that boardwalk that are going to need replacing. They're starting to rot. So maybe when we get our trail stewards kind of all lined up, we can start to come up with some project dates and get those people involved in working on them as well. Anybody have anything else they wanted to mention about Fenton Ruby Park maintenance?
They want to mention the duck boxes.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Yeah, it was obvious that Joe Philippi had been out there and refurbishing the duck boxes and cleaning them out and repositioning them. And I emailed him to thank him for doing that, and he emailed back with more details and said they'd they'd raised a couple of them by pulling the stakes up from the mud and repositioning them, and actually I think they had a couple new, one or two new duck boxes. But there were a couple stakes they, with the help of jacks and anything and whatever else they were using out there, they couldn't get a couple of the stakes up. So he was saying he was going to go back and try to work on that at some point. He and his son Nathan were doing this. And he put up a new duck box behind the beaver lodge on the beaver pond. On the far side of the beaver pond from the picnic area. And that beaver lodge has grown pretty good size. The geese are not going to be happy because I think that's basically the island where they used to put nests too.
Want to say
Yeah,
anything about the fishing platform?
and we were when we were out there, and Chris and Kathy and Bob Bittner and I were looking at the platform, wondering what we're going to do about that. And, Chris mentioned, said, "Well, why don't we just get Public Works to maybe bring their machine out here and lift it up and reposition it." And so it turns out that when Joe Philippi emailed me back, he said, "Oh, by the way," he said, "I took the liberty of talking to Troy Spazzato about bringing their equipment out there and repositioning the the observation deck." So he already did the legwork for us on that. And so Kathy and I said, talked and said, "Yeah, sure, he'll do it." He said he wasn't going to do anything more. Oh, well, actually, he said, Troy said he'd go out and take a look at it, but he said he wasn't going to do any more until he talked to us. So Kathy and I figured, well, let him go ahead and do that. So I emailed him and said, talk to Troy and see if it's something they can do to reposition that. That would be great. So we'll wait and see what we hear on that.
Thanks, Pete. All right, Knowlton Preserve. So most of you now have a pretty good visual of what the new parking lot looks like, or the newer parking lot. And we had started to talk last couple of meetings about possible signage over there, as well as whether or not we would want to put like a little trail starting from the parking lot that would tee into the current Knowlton Trail. So do people want to talk a little bit about some of their thoughts?
I think it'd be nice to have the trail begin at the parking lot, and maybe even, I don't know whether we want to have it keep the other entrance off of the road, if in that case, or we would want to, kind of reroute it by having it come in at a different point. Dave also mentioned, if we talked about possibly having a different return, that rather than trying to go close to the road, there's a ridge line that perhaps we could follow, and that would avoid problems with having to put water crossing. So I haven't walked the trail myself yet.
So the other thing that you're talking about, Carol, is making the Knowlton Trail basically a loop trail instead of just a spur.
Right, yeah.
Okay. Anybody else have some thoughts on what we might want to do there?
Yeah, I would say let's move the trailheads for both the Talmadge and the Knowlton Trail back to the parking lot. Can make the Knowlton Trail. I think we looked at going straight back from the parking lot up the bank, and it's not far over. And as several of us have noted, that people have been doing that anyway, cutting from the trail back to the parking lot. So if we go straight back from the parking lot, and they left a big pile of rocks, Public Works did, and there were some flat ones there. We could toss in some stone steps, I think, up that banking without a whole lot of trouble, and run the trail up the hill and over. And we might as well just bring the trailhead to the Talmadge, I think, back to across the street there at the onto the new property, because the new property and the old property, I think meet just about right across the street from the parking lot anyway. So then get everything right there at the parking area. So we make a trail going from there back up the road to the original Talmadge Trail. And then the signage we've been kicking around as to what to do there. All right, I guess we're talking about acknowledging all parties involved in the Knowlton property to redo a sign of some sort. And we could do some kind of acknowledgement sign right there in the parking lot at the new Knowlton trailhead, I would think. And then cross the street. And what was the deal? Talmadges would like to acknowledge all Talmadge.
Eleanor and Daniel.
Yeah, they want both names, Daniel W. and Eleanor C. Talmadge on the properties.
So I guess we need to talk about what we're going to incorporate those two properties onto one sign at all, or do they have to,
They have to. be
on
separate.
signage have to remain distinct?
Yes.
Yeah,
All right,
so we.
anyway.
But they want that to appear, and if we get a grant from the state, then we would have to put up a new sign anyway on the new parcel, because we have to comply separately with the new acquisition.
So we could put two separate signs on the same set of posts, I think, right there across the street at a trail entrance, I would think.
Well, actually, we could try that. We could put the sign maybe on both sides of the property because they're right next to each other. I suppose we could do something like that, or we could talk to Deep if we get the grant and say, listen, this is the story. We've got both these properties. They're right adjacent to each other. Can we combine? We could ask, can we combine it into one sign? But my understanding from speaking to them when we were applying for the grant, because they understood what we were going to be doing, was that each property needs its own sign. So we may not be agreeable to that. We could possibly take the current Talmadge sign and move it back a little bit so that as people enter that part of the property, it greets them, possibly. That's an option.
Well, we could make a new sign with renaming it the Talmadges, and at the new trailhead across from the parking lot, the branch going right back to the original Talmadge, we'll put one sign along the trail that way, and then the new sign to the left.
Yeah, I think, but we'll need to redo the sign, and we had some concerns about the condition of that sign anyway.
Condition of it.
Peter did a good job.
Oh, well, I know, I guess that problem was resolved. I'm sorry.
That was just, that was just superficial.
Oh, okay. But in any case, we'll have to be both parcels will have to show both names as a condition of the agreement of sale.
That's
So
what
we'll
I
have to
said.
redo it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So those signs we're not going to do anything with until we know about the grant.
Well, right, yeah.
But do we, before then, in this current budget year, when we still have some money, do we want to think about at least, and we don't have to do it tonight, but at least before June, expending some money to at least get building materials for signs? We could even buy that material ahead of time for the Talmadge, the new Talmadge, if we wanted to. Have that come out of this year's budget, and also consider what we might want to do for signage, if anything now, or just wait, just try to get some kind of a kiosk type thing there, or something that would support a sign.
I've got a question, Pete. Do you know if we have a copy of the plans for for Matt Lyons' project for building the kiosk at Fenton Ruby? Because I was looking at.
Not that I know of.
Okay.
That's
Well,
overkill. That's overkill. We're not gonna
That's
do
too
that.
much, yeah,
unless
yeah.
Somebody wants to do it.
But, you
Yeah.
know, down the road, and if you guys have a chance, if you're in the area again, and I should have mentioned this, if you go down the road to where the Knowlton sign is on on Mason Road, across the street, Yukon put up a little kiosk on their side. It's a smaller kiosk. It doesn't have a Lexan cover or anything.
Mhm.
Personally, this is just my thought. I would like to see something that has some type of a little roof over it and a place where you can post information, maybe put a larger map of the whole trail system on that, as well as, if we have upcoming events or we're looking for help with trail stewardship, we have a place to put, a laminated sign that's a little bit covered. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with Kathy. I think it would be nice, since it includes it's going to be the access point for both trail systems, that it would be nice to have something large enough to accommodate additional information. I don't think we need any signage, DEP signage at that point, because if I think we're all agreed that the best place, if we get a grant, to put the sign would be directly across from the parking lot. Would be great. Everybody coming out of the parking lot is going to look right at that sign. So Deep should be really happy with us about that. But we've already taken care of all the compliance issues on all the previous purchases. So that is not really a consideration in terms of signage for the parking lot.
Well, I didn't think we'd taken care of though, because then Deep wants their acknowledgement and signs right where people park to access the trails. I thought I heard somebody
That's-
say.
Yes, that's what they like. And what Carol, I think, was saying is that we originally met the conditions of the grant for the Knowlton because we never had the parking lot at the time. So we put those signs on Marsh Road and on Mason Road by the Blue Trail.
And same with Talmadge, that we didn't really have any parking except on-road parking. And so what we did, we were required to do the signage within 2 years of acquiring the property. And we met those requirements. And part of the grant application process, the new section on the application was to address issues of compliance if you'd had prior grants. And so we laid out as part of the grant application, we said, we feel we complied with the requirements for the prior grants at the time and the conditions that existed then. And so I don't think we need to do anything in terms of compliance with the prior grants, because then basically we'll be contradicting ourselves, if you will, because we feel that, and we stated in some detail exactly how we felt we had addressed the previous compliance requirements. So
Why don't we move the Knowlton sign to the parking lot? Kill two birds with one stone.
Well, we certainly could think about that as well.
yeah,
but-
it could be done, but I don't think we need to continually go back and readjust the compliance to agree with the current situation. We did it in accordance with what we were required to do at the time. And we certainly did it more promptly than on the north property where the signage didn't pop up till now. And that property was acquired at the same time that Knowlton was. So it took them a heck of a lot longer than their 2 years to get the signage up there. And that doesn't even show the deep acknowledgement. So.
Well, we've been talking about getting another sign for the Knowlton property and putting it in the parking lot.
Well,
why can't we just reposition the one we've already got?
Something to consider, Bob. But
Yeah,
I'm really concerned about sort of undercutting our. Sorry.
Okay, but yeah, I think that's an idea. Yeah, we didn't have the parking lot when we had put the Knowlton sign there and had the presentation and all that stuff. So, that it is an access point, but I guess if we wanted to save money, we could just move the sign. Otherwise, I would say just put up a new sign. That's,
Yeah, the other thing that had occurred to me that may have mentioned before is that we want to emphasize with the parking lot that it serves both Knowlton and Talmadge. And we could have come up with a sign with some wording saying, parking for Knowlton and Talmadge, funding for the acquisition of these properties. When, an acknowledgement of the deep funding of the acquisition of the properties. Something of that nature, but I'm a little bit concerned about just going back and redoing something that we have already attested and sworn that we have completed in accordance with the requirements of the grant. Because this whole section on prior compliance was new to the application this
yeah,
year.
I know.
And I don't think we want to undercut ourselves.
We heard all that. Okay.
Okay,
Let's
Okay,
move
so-
on.
So anybody else have any comments? Jackie, hi Patty, nice to see
Hi.
you.
Sorry,
Carolyn,
sorry.
Any thoughts from you guys?
I thought, Carol, you said you were going to come up with some wording on a possible new sign for the parking area.
well, that was before yesterday, and I'm waiting to see what people think would be acceptable and what we want before I waste my time drafting something. Plus, my
Anybody
life
else?
didn't go exactly as smoothly last week as I expected it to, so.
Jackie or Patty or Marilyn, do you have any other comments about it or ideas? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I want to make sure you're heard.
No, I think, yeah, kind of what everyone else was talking about, where to put the sign. in the
Having
neutral.
trouble hearing you, Jackie. I don't know volume wise.
Sorry.
I'm having trouble hearing you.
Oh,
Is it
Um,
volume? I don't know.
anyways, just agreeing with what others had said.
Okay. All right, anybody else? Do we want to decide anything tonight? Do we want to decide on whether or not we want to try to put in a set of stairs, maybe with a railing? Do we want to hire someone to do that work rather than do it ourselves?
Actually, there is a way that you could access it, starting at sort of ground level. If you, as you face the woods from the parking lot, when you're back to the road, there is you could do an approach that starts pretty much at ground level and comes across up to enter between the two hemlock trees, and as a gradual approach that wouldn't require probably putting in any stairs. It's
There's a
something to look
stone
at.
wall- There's a stone wall there, so we'd have to figure out how to either get around that or over it.
Between the trees, yes. But as far as starting the trail from the parking lot, I think you can do it pretty much at ground level.
There was a
without-
bank, there's a kind of a large bank there with some very large rocks. You'd have to go up about
Well, it
3
depend-
feet anyway, and then move those very large rocks. I don't see any point in doing that. I would vote for just doing it up the banking on the far side.
I think I'm talking about starting it farther over, sort of in the corner of the parking lot, Pete, not sort of
Right-hand side, you mean?
midpoint.
Well,
Huh?
yeah, we can look at that on the ground out there
Yeah.
and give it some more thought. Maybe
It
we
would be-
should agree first of all, whether we want to move the trailheads to both trails, to the parking lot and directly across the parking lot.
Well, I guess my thought on that is if somebody is going straight through from Talmadge to Knowlton or Knowlton to Talmadge, they're doing some kind of a circle. Let's say they park down at the other end for some reason. Do we want to have them come through the parking lot to get back onto the trails? One question. Obviously, most people will probably be starting from that parking lot.
I
Could
guess
have
we can
the
have two
trailhead.
entrances. I guess we have two entrances. Yeah, Jackie, I'm sorry.
I was gonna say we could have the trailheads at the parking lot and then still have kind of like the existing trails as more of a cut through.
Mhm.
Yeah, I have 2 entrances in effect.
Okay. And then if we make a circular trail on the Knowlton parcel, do we want it to come together before it gets to the parking lot? We don't want 2 entrances into the parking lot. We want to make like a lollipop.
Yeah, something,
Okay.
that would be fine. I think that requires more, taking more time to walk the trail and see, what the possibilities are.
Mhm.
But I do think it would be nice to have it loop around.
Okay,
in
so it
some
sounds
way.
like everybody's in agreement with starting the trail from the parking lot, going up from there, and then eventually, at least, making a circular or a return trail, maybe on the ridge or something like that. That's going to take a little more time and work. Maybe that's a project we can put together in the fall, but maybe we can start at least the access to the Knowlton Trail, the Knowlton Spur at this point from the parking area. That's something maybe we can think about for this spring, and the stairs. And maybe at least some kind of a sign board, something that we can apply a sign to later. Is that something that people think we can maybe accomplish before the summer or during the summer?
Or at least buy the materials for out of this year's budget and worry about construction later. Yeah, I kind of like Kathy's idea of something that's not as extensive as the kiosk at Fenton Ruby, but a larger than the normal sign, and with the protection, little peak roof. I haven't taken that close a look at what they did on the north property. I don't know if anybody else has other than Kathy, but maybe that'd be worth looking at that and seeing what materials we would need. And we have until the end of June to purchase stuff. So
I could also take a photograph of the one that's on the Yukon property, and send it around to people ahead of time, and you can kind of look at it. And it's fairly simple. I think it's just 1 post each. It's not beefy and heavy like the one at Fenton Ruby, that's for sure. But it does have a little bit of a roof on it. And maybe, if you'd like, I can try to approach the Boy Scout troop and see if they're looking for a project. So,
I've got a few bundle of shingles if we want to shingle it with asphalt shingles.
okay.
I think we've got a few shingles lying around in our basement too. So, but I don't know if we have enough. They're more spares for our roof.
Um,
Do you
Well,
wanna- Go ahead, Bob.
how much plywood are we going to need for the new sign or signs? I mean,
Well,
we should, we have the money on this year's budget, maybe buy half a sheet of, 3/4 inch exterior or marine plywood. So we have that. And when we need it, we can, cut it as needed.
Well, the only
signs, just to give you an example, the signs like the Knowlton and the Talmadge signs that are there now, the size of them is 24 inches by 32. So they're 32 wide by 24 high. And the boards that support them are probably, a little bit more than that. But again, if we may end up with some kind of signage on this kiosk, for a better word, I'm just going to call it a kiosk, little kiosk. You may want to make sure there's some additional space on it. So if you want to post an 8.5 by 11 on it, and or you want to put the map on it, we have more area for it.
Why don't we just buy a whole sheet of
Plywood,
plywood?
okay, and then some
the
posts.
thing is, we
And,
won't know what we need in the way of compliance signage until, because if we don't get a grant, then we won't need to comply with the signage.
Oh,
So
but this is not for the signage.
so this
on-
is you're talking just for a signpost in the parking lot, which is independent of the compliance signage.
Right, right. And I'm just calling it a kiosk for a better word. If we
Yeah.
talk about the kiosk, the only place that's going to be is in the parking area.
Yeah.
And it'll be a place to put a larger map of all the trail system. Just some information that basically says this is the town of Wellington, open space property, trail parking for Talmadge and Knowlton. And then maybe some space that would be available to post an 8.5 by 11, notice about something once in a while. Because right now, like the 8.5 by 11 sheet looking for trail stewards. I don't know if you guys can see that. That's Chris put those out on some backing board, and then we've got them attached to the posts. It just looks like there's so much stuff going on, on those signs right now, the Knowlton and the Talmadge entries. It'd be nicer if it was just part of what you post on the overall board.
Yeah. Well, I think for starters, why don't we just grab a couple 4x4s and a sheet of plywood, and we'll be set for a while.
Okay.
I think I have a couple of 4x4s left here. I have to be sure.
Okay.
But you got rid of all of the stuff in your garage, Pete.
No, no, that stuff's always been out back anyway, so. Yeah, I'm not sure. I know I got pressure treated 2x6s out there, but I'm not sure if there's a couple of 4x4s.
Does
Okay.
somebody want to come up with a concept plan for this little kiosk and kind of just write down what we might need for materials and what we maybe have or people can contribute that want to contribute, maybe have some things at home. Maybe send out an email just to kind of make sure we're ready to discuss this and maybe vote on expending some money next meeting in April.
Yeah.
Are we looking for just a board or something with either plexiglass or polycarbonate in front of it?
I think we should have a covering in the front over everything.
Yeah,
Or that, or we can just laminate whatever we put up onto it, which, we could have, if we have a larger
that's a
map.
lot easier than making a
Yeah.
case that opens up. But I mean, it'd be nice to have a case. It doesn't have to be as big as the one at Fenton Ruby. Nice to do that, but maybe that could wait until someone gets inspired to do that. But in the meantime, just put up a board and post weatherproof signage on it.
Yeah, couldn't we later just screw on?
Something better.
Couldn't we just,
Go ahead, Karen.
how do we, could we just screw on something later, covering later?
Possibly. I don't want to take up too much time because we have a lot of things on our agenda
Yeah, I
today.
think we should.
Yeah, if somebody wants to come up with, a concept of this, maybe we can try to nail it down in April. And feel free to send me whatever you have. If it's all right with everybody, I can just send it out just so you can add your 2 cents if you have some other ideas, and we can just bring them all back here and discuss them at the next meeting.
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, thanks guys on that one. All right, park and preserve maintenance responsibilities, trail stewards. So we put out some advertising looking for trail stewards, head steward, and also friends of the park. And to date, I have received, let's see, I just want to double check this. 6 different people have offered to volunteer to be trail stewards. Patty has offered to do Julia's Trail. Connie Bedan and her husband have offered to do, and we talked maybe about the Taylor Pond Trail for them. Josh Langevin for Weigold, Kane Gravelin for Ruby, and Bill and Kathy Bland for the Talmadge. And then Carol and Dave have offered to do the Knowlton Spur at this point. So we've got, at this point, 6 volunteers for trails. And we certainly might have some additional people that will be contacting us. What I'd like to suggest is maybe we think about having a trail steward workshop sometime in late April, maybe after our next meeting, where we would invite these people that have volunteered to all meet at Fenton Ruby Park So they can get to know us, we get to know them. And also we can kind of go over some basics about trail stewardship, maybe take a walk on one of the trails and discuss things like, trailblazing, how to trim along the trail, how to take down branches and things that they find if they want, pile them up for wildlife piles, and other kinds of things that we can ask them to do short of going out there with a chainsaw. So.
I think that's a good idea.
I think that's great. Kathy, would it be possible for you to send out to us the trail stewards' names and which trails they're going to be, they've signed up for?
Yeah,
It
sure.
would be helpful for all of us to have that information.
Okay. Do we want to try to set a date in April? Where some of us could be available to be out there? I was looking, maybe our next meeting is April 20th. And I was looking maybe at a Saturday or Sunday. People have a preference, Saturday, Sunday. It doesn't have to be everybody from the commission, but I'd love to have Pete out there and Bob, because you guys have done a lot of the, stewardship.
Yeah. Saturday.
April 23, 24, April 30th, or May 1st. Something along those
I'd
lines.
have to look at my calendar.
Yeah, weekends would probably be good. Saturday.
Yeah, a Saturday's probably I think would probably generally work better, but it works better for me.
We could also make it a park work day. That's another thing. We can send out information to friends of the park that we have right now and just say, come on out, and we can get people doing some of the work too. So we can make it a work day as well as a steward workshop.
April 23rd, 24th is the only weekend that's actually good for me.
Okay, thanks.
Because
Karen.
there's
Let me get my calendar. I don't know, but
And if you're not sure at the moment and you just want to email me, but it would be
Okay.
nice if we could nail down a weekend day.
Yeah.
So that's-
Easter weekend is no good, and then the 23rd and the 24th, and then we're down in DC for 2 weeks.
Okay.
So, but that's just me.
Any, Bob or Pete, do you have some thoughts on what works for you?
Try to work in that April date. I'll let you know.
yeah, I think that as far as I can tell at this point, April 23rd would be okay for us.
Be okay at this point, but can't guarantee what may or may not come up that may take precedence, but at this time, it's either of those days, 23, 24 are fine.
Okay. All right. So what I'll do is I'll work on something to get out to the stewards, because I'd like to give them a heads up too. And I'll see if that, that date works for most of them at least. And if for some reason it's not working out, maybe we'll have to shift it to another weekend. But we still have one more meeting before then anyway, so. But keep the 23rd if you can open. If
We
you're,
could do after Sunday would be okay for us if it's, as long as it's afternoon, if that works better for other people.
okay, and if we made it on Saturday, what time of day is best for folks?
In the morning.
Morning.
10-ish, 9-ish,
9:30.
9:30?
Hedge bets.
All right. And then we still have time on the 20th if we want to talk about bringing out some, refreshments or whatever, like we've done before for trail days. We can give some thoughts to some of the projects between now and then too, that we might want people to do. We've got one thing that we did notice is in the fields, there's some saplings that are coming up that really need to be cut back. And maybe we can have a lopper workshop out there. Everybody bring their loppers and work on that. And we can bring the gas powered cutter and cut down some of that. Those saplings that are growing into the field. Do you know what I'm talking about on Taylor Pond Trail?
Yeah.
Could lug some bridge stringers out there to Julia's too,
Yeah,
and
Mhm.
bridge and deck boards.
okay. We can talk, maybe we can talk, Peter, and we can, if there's things we need to cut up beforehand, we can work on that. Excellent. Thank you, guys.
I'm starting to look for long extension ladders at auctions, so.
Good for you.
One other thought that did come to my mind for volunteers, we can certainly ask them to bring equipment that they might have, gloves, loppers, those kinds of things. But if people do not have equipment of their own, we might want to think about buying a pair of loppers or something where people could borrow if they are going out to do some trail maintenance. So if you have some old loppers that are still in good condition, you got 3 pairs of them, you want to donate one to the cause, let me know. Oh, all right, town development, anything on the agenda? Anybody know of anything going on?
No, I had talked to Mike D'Amato. FedEx would like to expand into that back area that they have an easement on. And there's some conversation about them buying a large piece of property. I won't tell you which one. And giving that to the town if they can get out of the conservation easement on the rest of that property for a swap. There's some conversation about that. I was approached about a year ago with the initial thing, and I found out that there was a meeting that took place with FedEx and the building department about that. It hasn't gone anywhere right now, but that facility at the size that it is just isn't working for them, and they want to get bigger. So that's the only thing that's might be a possibility.
Bob, are they talking about expanding onto the additional piece of property or expanding onto the existing property?
They're talking about talking with the state to get out of that easement that's on the rest of that property
Okay,
and expanding into that. And for them to do that, they're willing to purchase another large tract here in town and swap that to the town for the easement that they would then expand their facility into.
okay, but that is not necessary. Is that adjacent to their existing property? Or is that something you can't disclose?
No, it is not adjacent to their property, but I think everyone would be very pleased with acquiring this piece of property that's being talked about.
Okay,
I have a question to ask. So
just wanted clarification.
do we know, Carol, do you know who might hold the easement for that
The
property?
state does. They have to get out
Yeah.
of an easement with the state.
Why did the state get the easement and not the
I don't
town?
understand. That's what Mike D'Amato told me.
Oh, okay. Well, we
That
should have
the state has to agree for them to be able to get out of that easement. I don't understand how it was written or anything about it.
yeah. Carol, do you think we have a copy of the easement?
Oh, yeah, I know we have a copy of the easement. I'm not sure that, let's see, I'm looking at the easements.
Well, we don't know exactly what's happening, but it might be good to at least go into our files and look at the copy of the easement that we have, because Carol's been wonderful about on every property that has a conservation easement, we have a file on it. So I don't know all the details either, but it'll be interesting to look at the easement and whether or not, who holds the easement. It may be the state, but
Yeah, it's this whole process started out slow, it peaked, and now it's just kind of simmering, and it's sort of in FedEx's corner if
mhm.
they want to move forward with it or not. So that's where it sits right now.
Okay, thank you.
And I know that there was an extensive plan associated with that. And it's a large parcel. It's 58 acres. And, but I believe the easement was, I thought the easement was to the town, but I can go up to the town office building tomorrow and check it out. But
I would ask you that you don't pressure Mark or Mike for any information.
no, I'm not gonna I'm gonna look up I'm gonna go to the source documents, Bob. I'm
All
gonna
right,
go
no,
to-
I'm just,
No, the text. Yeah,
I'm just mentioning this in passing.
Right.
yeah, okay. No, yeah.
And it's not on the docket at the moment. It's not something that. we
No,
can comment
no,
on, so-
it hasn't,
No.
it's not really public,
Yep,
but
yep.
it's something that is being worked on very slowly.
Good.
Do we know what's on that 58 acres? Why it's viable as conservation preservation? Do we know that?
In order for, they blasted up there, they
What is it?
blasted a lot of that, the area where their facility is now was
Mhm.
blasted. And in order for the town to let them do what they did insofar
Yeah.
as constructing that facility, they had to put a conservation easement on a certain amount of the property.
So is it junk?
No,
The
No.
58
well,
acres?
it's
Do you know
with
what I
enough,
mean?
well, with
I think
with
it's around
modern
the pond. There's a pond there.
Yep,
well,
there is,
they-
and that's
they
privately owned, right?
They made the pond. That takes care of some of their stormwater off the parking lots and such. That's why that's there.
Okay.
But there's a pond adjacent to it that is not part of that property.
They don't own that property.
They don't own the Ruby Pond.
No,
Right.
they don't.
That's on
No.
they do not own that.
But I thought that and I might be wrong, I thought the conservation easement part of their property was close to that pond. But that's something, Carol can explore and maybe.
Yeah, if we're meeting at the town office building, we have the map to look at but I know that my understanding is that there was a rather extensive volume that divides the easement area into certain parcels, and they were supposed to have been maintained in a certain way, but I doubt very much that anything's followed through because the state put the conditions on it, but I believe the easement is to the town. But we'll do some research and find out what's going on with that. But that was a while back, and it's rather unusual in the amount of detail that went into the conditions on the easement.
Thank you. All right, moving on to regional pollinator pathway initiatives. We were supposed to have a regional meeting today online, but that got canceled. So I don't have any updates from the regional group. Connie, do you mind if I just briefly mention some things that you might be thinking of, or if you just wanted to, or do you want to wait for another meeting?
Yeah, you can go ahead and mention it. The girls will be meeting shortly about the whole project, so.
Okay, great. So Connie and I have been starting some conversation about whether or not the Girl Scouts might be interested in doing something along the lines of pollinator gardens, pathways, kind of working on that as an initiative. And Connie and the girls have started, and her colleague have started to talk about if the girls might want to do something for a silver award. And that would involve, multiple activities, which could include things like developing gardens around town, educating residents about the importance of pollinators, working with, for example, because nothing's gelled, but, the school, the library, us, the Conservation Commission, and, perhaps even thinking about establishing a small pollinator garden at Fenton Ruby Park with a little bit of information about it so that when residents go to the park, they'd have an opportunity to see the garden and learn a little bit more about the importance. So I know that they're going to work something out and then present it to us at some other time.
Kathy, have they considered working with the Wellington Garden Club?
Connie, you want to mention anything?
Yep, I've been in contact with Jen, I believe her name is. And so the girls, actually, Kathy, I sent you an email about possibly meeting up at Fenton Ruby shortly. So that the girls could talk to you about the area there. And then meeting up with Jen in the garden club is on our list, as well as we're going to get the schools involved, hopefully. Because I know Hall School does have a type of environmental clubs, so they'd be able to sustain the gardens there. But the whole idea is that, you know, the girls are going to do the education around it as well. So getting the word out, getting, you know, people to understand that there is this pollinator pathway and all that. But they do have to get it approved through Girl Scouts first. So they all submitted their request to do their silver award on this. Once they come back, and I'm sure it'll be approved. This is a bigger one than usually is done for the area. Once that happens, then there's a whole plan that they'll develop. So I do want to have them come and present it to you. That's part of the whole silver award thing, is to educate and to get buy-in on some of these things. So potentially at that April 20th meeting, if we could get a few minutes to have them talk, would be good.
Connie, I have an article that I cut out of an issue of the Last Green Valleys magazine last year, I believe, that's all about the pollinators and talks about the pollinator pathways. And I thought maybe that's something the girls might be interested in using as a resource for that. So if maybe we can make a connection, I can get that to you.
Yeah, absolutely. They're doing their research now. So they're spending the next week researching everything about it. So hopefully they're learning something.
Yeah, but it does focus because it's Last Green Valley associated. It talks about things in the area that are done with pollinators and about bees and a whole bunch of stuff. And I just thought that might be a nice resource. So
Yes, it would be. Thank you.
So there's some other things going on too locally. I sent out to everybody the information about Goodwin State Forest. Friends of Goodwin are putting on a virtual program on pollinators on March 24th. That's free. Foster Hill Farm, I didn't send this out to you, but if anybody's interested, Foster Hill Farm in Stafford is sponsoring a talk by Marjorie Winters, and that's going to be held on April 18th. It's in person. It's at the Senior Center. So there's a number of things happening locally to kind of get the word out more about, you know, helping pollinators, helping residents understand about how they can contribute, maybe reducing lawn sizes and letting some parts of their yard, for example, go a little wild, reducing use of chemicals and fertilizers and so on, as well as establishing small gardens. So, and I think Joshua's Trust has done some work on the pathways too. They've worked on this. As well as several other towns locally have their own initiatives. So I thought, you know, when I'm talking with Connie, it just sounded like this great opportunity to connect and work with the Girl Scouts and to support them, you know, and look at even our own open space properties, if there's anything we can do to support pollinators even more and educate public. Does anybody have any concerns if Connie and I had talked maybe about going out and just looking at Fenton Ruby, maybe in the area adjacent or across from the parking area, just looking where there might be a possibility of putting in a small pollinator garden, maybe with, you know, everything would be native flowers and or shrubs. So anybody have any concerns? Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Is the piece on Moose Meadow, I guess it's just south of the park, across from the old town dump, that little like triangle that's owned by the town.
Yeah.
And the town Public Works recently cleared it, and now it's just kind of grass, and I think they go and mow it. So I feel like that would be a good area to turn into.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a good suggestion.
yeah, good idea.
Pollinator garden would be great there.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a good idea, Jackie.
But I don't know, what kind of ownership the town has over it, if they would be open to that, or
Yeah,
what of that property is. I think it's part of the old town dump property that I think that the road maybe used to go
Yeah,
on the other side of it or something like
I
that.
think so, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
So
Yeah, there was
that's
a
a
major
possi-
construction project on that section of Moose Meadow Road, and that may have sort of been a swap out thing as when that reconstruction was done.
So that might be a possibility, Connie. We don't manage that as a conservation commission. If that's something you wanted to look into, you probably have to check with Public Works or Mike D'Amato and Land Use just to see who's in charge of that property.
Okay. Yeah, one of the things that they were talking about is to build the garden at Fenton Ruby, get the gardens at the school, and then open up kind of not a service, but pretty much a service where after we've educated homeowners and businesses, if they wanted to install one and would buy the plants, the girls would come out and put the gardens in for them. So if that was something, if the town wanted something there, that would definitely be something they could do.
So going back to Fenton Ruby Park, what's the commission's thoughts on having something on the grounds that we manage? Something small. I'm not talking large.
I'm all for it. Yeah, and probably the best area would be in the field near the house site. And because you need, for pollinator gardens, probably adequate sunshine is required for a lot of the pollinator plants.
When Peter and I were out at the park the other day doing some maintenance, we just kind of looked around, and I think some of the things that we have to make sure, though, is that whatever gets put in, a couple of issues, it's rather low maintenance, or there's a plan to continue to maintain it at some point, and also maybe putting it in a place where who's ever contracted to go out and mow the grass out in the area around the picnic tables and all that, that it's not going to become a real burden for them to try to get around the garden. So those would be some things to consider as we look at possible places. Would anybody else like to, if Connie and I come up with a date, does anybody else possibly want to join us out there and look at possibilities? I can send an email out once trying to come
I
up
might
with
be
a date.
interested in doing that.
Kathy, we were trying to shoot an email. I said the 24th. I think that's Thursday.
Okay.
I think it's next Thursday. Because I can get the girls over there at about 3 if anybody could do that.
Okay, 3 o'clock. I can do that. I'm actually going over.
Thursday,
Yeah.
Thursday, the 24th.
Mhm.
At 3 o'clock, Connie?
Yes.
Okay, I can do that, and if anybody else from the commission wants to join us, we'll help them come.
I'll try
Cool.
to come.
And just so you know, I'm going to the Stafford Pollinator program at 5 o'clock that day. So if anybody wants to carpool, if you want to sign up in advance, I'd be happy to drive. So, okay, thanks, Connie.
You're
All
welcome.
right, moving on. Membership. I sent you out an updated list and with our agenda. So it's dated March 2022. And basically just we added Patty in for a new member, regular member, excuse me. And her term was to fill Julia's vacancy term. So that's on there. And right now we have space for 2 more alternates. So if you know anybody who's interested, encourage them to come on to one of our meetings. We can show them how much fun we have. Other issues. I just have one item here I'd like to add to the agenda because we've talked about this before, the Cadle Rock property, and that is both in Wellington and in Ashford. I just had an update from Erica recently. Ashford and Wellington are applying for a state Brownfield Grant for that property. And I let her know that Connecticut Forests and Parks has reached out to the commission again, just asking what's going on, the status, because the Nipmuc Trail runs through Wellington and Ashford's portion of that. And I believe what they'd like to do ultimately is to get a conservation easement along their trail corridor. So I asked Erica if, while they're applying for the grant, if that would be something the town might be able to entertain. And she said she would look into it to see if they could do that at the same time that they're applying for the grant, or whether they'd have to wait. So, any other old business people want to add tonight? All right, moving on, new programs, Connecticut Trails Day. So I spent a good amount of time talking to Alan Humphreys from Park and Rec. Very nice young man who's recently taken over for Marine. And we talked about how we could partner, how the Conservation Commission could partner with Park and Rec on some activities. And I explained to him some of the things we've done at the park in the past, including walks by Barbara Austin, Horizon Wings, geology walks, and so on. And so we brainstormed a little bit about what we might be able to do this year in partnership. And we came up with 2 events. And one would be a nature walk with Barbara Austin. And I did reach out to Barbara, and she's very excited that it's a possibility that, you know, we would have her do a nature walk. And we talked about doing it on June 4th. So we could basically have an event for Connecticut Trails Day. She would do a nature walk on that Saturday, June 4th, from 1 to 3 at the park. And Parks and Rec, what they would do is they would take charge of having to advertise and register people for that event. So if we want to do that, Barbara's willing to be there that day. And I asked her what her stipend would be, and she said, whatever you've done in the past. And I said, I believe it's $150. Maybe I'm off base, but that sounded about ballpark to me. And she said that would be fine. So people have some thoughts on that.
That's a good way to use the park more.
Good idea. Get back into the education aspect of what we used to do, a couple events a year and that sort of thing. We've kind of slacked off on that. So that'd be good to get back into that and yeah, incorporate Parks and Rec there, especially in terms of sharing the responsibilities and reaching out to the community in that way.
Yeah, I'm all in favor of it. It's been a long time since we've had an event like this. I think it's good to get back into it.
So if we do that, Alan said he would personally be available to be there that day as well to help out. I would suggest that we think about having some of us or someone else volunteer at least to be there to help facilitate parking, because that's really the limiting factor. As a matter of fact, Alan and I met out at the park and just looked at, you know, he wanted to kind of see the grounds again. He'd been out there for the turkey event that they ran for the kids, but he wanted to look at the grounds again where we would host this. And we looked at the parking, and the main parking lot could probably hold 10 to 11 cars. There's also some space that as you enter from Moose Meadow Road onto Burma on the left-hand side, there's a guardrail there that kind of pushes out toward the river. It's not on Burma, it's not on Moose Meadow, it's on Burma. And it looks like we could put 4 cars in there as well. So in the main area, we could fit maybe 14, 15 cars if we had somebody there parking people, you know, like telling people where to park. And then we went down to the very end of Burma Road where the turnaround is, and we looked at that space, and we estimated we could probably fit 6 cars in there, maybe 8 if we had permission from the DePilka family to block their driveway, you know, not go into the driveway, but we would park 2 cars there. So if they weren't going to be using their property that day, you know, we could put 2 extra cars that would basically be on their driveway entrance. So we asked him, go ahead, Bob.
why not think about parking cars in that first field up above on the other side of the river? You know, where we went star watching a few times.
Yeah, we talked about that. The problem I think will be that the hay, it's a hay field and we have a contract with, is it Brenda Wilds for cutting? She can't cut in there until August, but I don't know how many cars we really can drive in there without damaging the grass.
No, it's early in the season. The grass will grow back. She can't cut it until August.
Okay, but can we even drive cars in there at that point without?
Why not?
people-
Why not? It's up high. You're not anywhere near the low spot in the back where it's wet.
Well, that's a possibility. When I talked to Barbara about the walk, we talked about what's a reasonable number of people to have on a walk, especially when you're stopping and talking, stopping and talking. You know, we talked about maybe 25 at the max.
Mhm.
So we thought maybe if the park, you know, held at least 20 cars, thinking
Yeah,
that most cars would come with more than one person, probably, you know, be a couple or a family.
You could have members of the Conservation Commission park there, and that would alleviate us parking where the good parking is, and we would know where not to go run too far afield, so to speak. No
There we
pun
go.
intended. Yeah,
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
put
Milan.
put us there instead.
Mhm.
And Kathy, if we're doing this as a Connecticut Trails Day event, we can also place limit on the number of attendees, can't we?
Yes,
A
we
lot, 'cause
can.
there are, those all have conditions on, you know, hours, you know, and sometimes limitation on numbers is part of the information for the event.
One of the things I did talk to Ellen about is whether or not we want to actually use the Connecticut Forest and Park website to advertise this. And let me just tell you my thoughts.
Yeah,
If you
sure.
put everything in, then they basically take all the registration on that site. You get the information as the person that signs up, but they basically, as people register, they register on that site. So then if you also have people trying to register through another method like Parks and Rec, you're not able to kind of put those lists together until the end. And you might have more people register than you can actually accommodate. So we talked about whether or not we would want to just do this through Park and Rec's normal mechanism of registering people, and they would handle cutting it off at a certain number, rather than have it go on the main Connecticut Forest and Park.
Okay,
website.
so the date would coincide with with the trail days, but it would be conducted just through town of Wellington. That's fine. Sounds great to me. And that way we can also control numbers better
And I think,
and emphasize the local connection.
yes, and I think that way too, if we're advertising it locally through, you know, to mostly Wellington residents, then we're more apt to have Wellington residents come than if it's a statewide advertisement. You could have people coming from other towns, and I'm not excluding people. I'm just saying we might end up with a lot more residents from other places, and our Wellington residents wouldn't have an opportunity. So,
And
Just
also,
make it Wellington Forest and Parks.
yep, that's fine. I just wanted to clarify what the intent was, because it sounded more as if you wanted to do it with a local thrust, and that doesn't work that well with the wider event. And with a wider event, we've tended to find that when we have events, they're not well attended because there's so many other things going on. Whereas it's something targeted locally, I think would be much more successful.
Just one comment, Kathy.
yeah, Bob.
The deadline for the Wellington Wire is coming up.
Right.
So we might want to decide if we're going, that if we want to do this, we should make the judgment tonight so that Alan can get that into the Wire.
Right. So do we want to expend $150? I think that would be, first of all, it sounds like everybody's in agreement. This is a good thing to do. June 4th is okay. That works. Does somebody want to make a motion to expend some money to pay for this?
I will if nobody else will.
Good, Carol.
Yeah, I move that we authorize the expenditure of $150 for Barbara Austin to lead a nature walk at Fen Ruby Park on June 4th in conjunction with the Wellington Recreation Commission as a co-sponsor.
I second it.
All in favor or discussion?
Who was that, Patty, seconding?
Patty was the second, yep.
Thank you.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? And abstentions? So moved. Thank you, guys. All right, so we can talk a little, we have a lot of time to talk more about parking and volunteer, if people want to volunteer that day to help out with parking. The next thing that we did talk about is Horizon Wings, and Alan was going to try to get in contact with Mary Beth. He had emailed her just to find out what the cost would be and what availability she might have this summer. And he got back to me today, actually, and he said that she's available on, let's get this, June 25th to do a program, if we would like, at the park. And she would bring in 4 birds of prey, and it would cost $300 for her to be there for an hour, basically, to do a presentation at the park. So that's another possibility. And Parks and Rec would do the same thing. They would do the advertising. They would take registration, and Alan or Chris, who's his assistant, would be at the park that day to help out. Thoughts on that?
How much dollars?
$300. Mhm.
300?
Yeah, it's hard to know at this point. I think without knowing what we might want or need to spend for materials for some of the project, signage project at the parking lot at Talmadge Knowlton. It's sort of hard to know, because that'll take a good chunk of the two events would take a pretty good chunk of what we've got. Probably not an issue, but
Yeah, let's do the math. So we have $1,122, and we'd be expending a total of $450 for both programs, which would leave us with $672.
70, yeah, that's probably enough. Question is, would rec cover any of the cost?
I did ask Alan that. He said, unfortunately, they have a lot of expenses coming up that were not part of their budget. He's concerned that he does not have money. He felt that what they could contribute is help with advertising, registration, and then boots on the ground.
Yeah, okay. Does it have to be done in this fiscal year? I think there's a good chance we won't use our money, but
it doesn't have to.
But
I think, he was looking to get, some things going for this part of the year, and then maybe we could think about some things for the fall as well. So
In the past, haven't we had the people with the raptures come in the fall?
that's a good question, Bob. I don't remember when we had them last.
I'm just wondering, trying to squeeze these things in rapid fire as
Mhm.
opposed to one in the spring and maybe something early fall.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Once
'cause
everybody's back in town,
because these would be two events only 3 weeks apart, basically. And I
Right.
think I think maybe it would be better to space them out more if that's possible. Yeah. you know,
Any-
we'll probably end up underspending our budget, but you know, some other things may come up. And we've talked about some other possibilities, including perhaps even purchasing some equipment for trail stewards to use. And that's something that another potential use if we get to the end of the year. We also talked about possibly, and I don't know if you want me to pursue this, maybe talking with Public Works about putting pedestrian crossing signs on Mason Road by the parking lot and also by where the Nipmuc crosses. And there are standardized signs. Probably the most suitable one is the one that talks about, has pedestrian crossing and has a picture of an adult and a child. I thought that would be their standard sign, the standard road signage that's apparently there's a national standard on road signs and what colors and sizes they come in various sizes. So, but I thought I at least if you would like me to, I could pursue what would make sense to do.
Yeah,
And
if you
that's
want to
another
look into,
potential use of something we've talked about doing, that we might be able to use up some of our funds before the end of the year as well.
okay. So anybody else have thoughts on the program itself? So one of the concerns is making sure we have enough money in our budget for things for this fiscal year.
Yeah, well, there's something to be said, as Bob mentioned, about spreading the thing out, but then again, fall sometimes tends to be a busy time of year for lots of people, and spring is when people are maybe wanting to get outside and do something in the outdoors, and the time to catch them is in the springtime when they're thinking about doing springy things.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, does anybody know what the school calendar is? Because that might affect things a bit too, because I have no idea what the current school
I think
calendar
the
is.
kids would be out by the 25th of June, though.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I just don't know. It just seems to me that having two events that close together doesn't make a lot of sense, generally.
Oh,
Anybody else have any thoughts or?
There's item B under 7, which is, I would assume ARPA is American Rescue Plan funding. Do you know if any of that money is headed our way? Because there's another source of funding for us to do things. Or is it that?
We have to apply for it, Marilyn, and we can talk about that, if we
Oh,
have
okay.
projects, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And
Yeah.
there is a legal notice in today's Chronicle about a hearing on proposals for ARPA funding. They did.
Carol, wait a minute, please, because this doesn't have anything to do with ARPA right now, though, right? What we're talking about, Trails Day, Horizon Wings. And I just want to make sure we're following what we're talking about.
I thought Marilyn was talking about ARPA funding.
Well, she just asked if this idea of doing something like a program could be funded by ARPA. I believe that's what she was asking.
Yeah.
That's what I was asking. And since it's not appropriate, I pulled
I'm
down
not
speaking about that.
Yeah, I looked at, we got an email from ARPA.
Carol, excuse me. I'm going to just stop you for just a minute because we haven't finished our conversation about Horizon Wings.
But I thought we were talking about Horizon Wings in conjunction with ARPA funding.
Well,
But
I
it's
don't
not
think
something-
we need the money, need
Well,
ARPA to pay for the Horizon.
that's-
Wings.
Yeah.
Because what we were sent about uses of ARPA funding, what this in Wellington did not seem to include things that we could apply for.
Well, I will talk about it in a moment, but I don't believe that they would fund a program of this size, or of this sort. So I'm not sure that would be something we could ask for funding for. I think the question is two things here. One is, do we want to expend more money from our budget before the end of the year? Number two, do we want to have another event in the same month we're already having Barbara do something earlier in the month?
Maybe not.
Okay. I mean, there's been no commitment with Horizon Rings.
Right.
Rings. I think he just, said she would be available that day if that's something he
Yeah.
wanted to do. So we can always look for something else later in the year.
Maybe that's better. Yeah, they're only 3 weeks apart, that those two events would be, so.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Do we want to make a motion on this or just say, are people generally feeling let's wait?
Wait,
I'd like to wait and do it some other time.
Wait,
Wait, okay. Patty, any thoughts?
Wait, I think.
Okay. All right, that's great. So for now, anyway, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go forward with the June 4th program, the Nature Walk with Barbara, and then we'll think about some things for the fall or later in the year. Okay. All right,
Sounds
now we can talk about ARPA. So Carol, go ahead.
Yeah, because the Wellington ARPA Commission they're at the beginning stages of looking at things. And the eligible uses of funds are separated into 5 broad categories: support the public health response, address negative economic impacts, investments in water and sewer, broadband infrastructure, and replace loss of revenue, which was a little bit more and I'm not sure that anything that we might propose would fall into those categories. And as I said, there is they have come up with a list of some projects, and they're going to be having a hearing, and there was a legal notice in today's Chronicle about that. So just so people want to look at it, but we could address, ask for further information on exactly what kinds, how broad uses of the funding they're considering. But I don't, given those eligible, those categories, I'm not sure that our projects of ours would apply.
So a couple other things. So the town's received $1.7 million, and the commission that's been formed for the American Rescue Plan Act is going to be working on reviewing applications from boards, commissions. It even can come from members of the public. And so the broad categories Carol mentioned are what was stated in an email that came to all of the departments and commissions. I did investigate this a little bit further. I talked to Erica, and I went online to look at the application form that the town is using, because you have to apply online. And the categories are a little bit broader still on the application form. So you can do things that are important for public health, assistance to households, to small businesses, public employee assistance, capital expenditures, replacement of lost revenue, and then the other categories that Carol mentioned. And there's been some articles in local newspapers too about even land trusts and organizations like Mass Audubon working in their communities to apply for funds for outdoor open space protection, trail work, and so on, because they can put it under the category of public health, the benefits to people. So
yeah,
we definitely could submit an application if we came up with a project that we felt came under these types of categories. And it doesn't hurt to apply. I mean, if you apply, it's not that difficult. You'd have a hearing. One of us would have to go in front of this commission that's been appointed. There's members of different boards and commissions that are on it. There's members, I think residents at large and so on, that are on this commission. And you present your project, and they can decide if it's something that they can use the ARPA funds for. And so I don't think it keeps us from applying.
Yeah.
There was a question from one of our group, and I happened to see Erica today when I was at the town office building getting our mail. And I asked her if it was possible that the commission could actually request funding to pay for the Talmadge property, which is in process, instead of using capital reserve and open space funds. So she was actually going to look into that and get back to me. Or if there could be funds that could be used to replenish the open space fund, for example. So again, she's going to get back to me, and then maybe we can have a conversation during our next meeting. The other
That-
thing,
Yeah, I have a little bit of concern about that, in that the funding has already been approved by the town to come from specific sources. And I'm not sure whether that, how that would work. It could be done, possibly be spent on expenses associated with trail development, or something of that nature. It says funding should only be requested by the person who will be managing the project or purchase process, is one of the things this email came, that was sent out to anybody and everybody who might possibly apply.
right.
Which I
So
forwarded to
then-
Kathy.
yeah, generally speaking, I think if you were on a board or commission, it would be the chairperson of that board commission, or if you were a
Yeah.
department head at the town office building, for example.
Let
I mean, some of the things, for example, that people are applying for funding are, the fire departments are applying for funding, Public Works is applying for funding, Board of Ed.
Yeah, I
And
could read you what's going to the hearing.
Carol, I think if people want to go online, they can.
You can look it up.
Yeah, they
but
can
it's-
look it up. So if anybody's interested, you just go onto the town website, click on boards and commissions, and then you can look down and there's the ARPA commission. You can click on that, and then it has their meeting agenda for next Monday, I believe, on the 21st. And then it has a list of all of the funding request submissions they're going to be reviewing on that date. And looks like there's about 8 of them, 8 projects. But I don't think it negates us from having,
Oh, no, they will be continuing to take requests for funding. But that's not just a meeting, that's the public hearing on March 21st at 6:30.
Right, thank you.
One project that we could consider maybe is at the new bridge over the Taylor Pond Trail. Because I don't know, if you go and stand on that bridge and look at the, where the long strips of wood go across from one end of the bridge to the other, there's a lot of rot on that bridge.
Oh,
That's a big project.
Right.
That's a good sized project, and that's the main access to the part of the park that most people want to go to. Especially people who can't walk up hills, like across the, up the hill on the other side. If you can only walk flat land, that's the best trail. And then you have all of the erosion of all of the tree trunks after you leave the bridge that we replaced probably 5 years ago with wheelbarrows of wood chips. That area is not easy to walk on anymore if you've got some footfall issues, and there's older people that probably would love to still walk there, and that could also be an impediment to them getting further on into the park. But the bridge is definitely could use some work. That's just one idea, but we don't have to discuss it further.
Those are great ideas, Marilyn, and this is the whole reason for kind of talking about this, is that we can, from meeting to meeting, keep this on our agenda as people come up with some ideas. What we'd have to come up with to be able to submit the application is we'd have to have basically an overview of what the cost of the project would be. So we'd have to figure out, we might even have to get bids for things if we're going to require contractors to do part of the work. You have to come up with when you think you would implement the plan, how long the plan would take, If there's any other resources that you have access to that could help to pay for this, for example, like park and rec funds, or if it's already something that's in your budget, or if you've already submitted something to CIP. So those are all questions on that form, the online form that we would have to answer to apply for this. That's a good thought. Now, somebody else, I don't know, I'm trying to remember the steps, we were talking about building the steps. Again, if we wanted to do something like that and hire a landscaper to do that work, that could be a potential ARPA project too. So.
I think that, as Marilyn said, that there's a public health aspect. There definitely was increased use of our outdoor facility, the town's outdoor facilities during COVID. And since this is COVID related funding, that things that apply to the outdoor recreation aspect could very well apply. I'm not discouraging. I interpreted what they sent out initially as being a little bit more restrictive than I think they intend to be. Some other towns were listing rather more extensive potential uses of the funding.
So if you want to keep, give it some thought, and then when we meet again, if you have some ideas, we can talk about. We can look into that and to applying. I mean, as far as I understand, the funds do not have to be spent until 2024. But again, I think there's going to be a lot of people requesting funding. I mean, already for that public hearing, if you add up all the money that people are requesting, not to say they're going to get the money they're requesting, but it's over $800,000 worth of funding that's being requesting just in that one day.
And and the total the town is getting is 1.7.
So it's almost half of that.
Almost half of the potential funding.
Right.
And I think there will be a lot of pressure for things like business compensation to businesses. And that's one for loss of income is an area where we expect there will be some pressure to.
And then we have some other issues coming up. There's some damage to Moose Meadow Road in the upper part, the northern part. And that's something that they feel that might cost maybe $250,000 to repair. So I'm not sure if they're going to be looking for ARPA funds for that, or if it's going to come up from somewhere else. But there'll be a lot of people requesting money.
Yeah, well, I could tell you way back when in 1994 or 5, whatever that was, it cost $1 million to fix up the section of Moose Meadow Road beginning at from Jared Sparks down past the park. Was it
Expensive. Roads are expensive.
roads are expensive.
So any other items that people wanted to add to new business? I don't have any communications except for that, the ARPA funding. Okay, so next meeting will be April 20th, 2022. Do I hear any motion to adjourn?
Let's
Bob?
adjourn.
I saw Bob's lip moving.
Were you moving to
So
adjourn?
moved.
Okay. All right, guys. Well, have a good month, but I'm sure we'll be checking in with each other before
Yep.
that. So,
Okay.
Have a
okay.
good rainy day tomorrow.
Thank you. Hey, that also brings to mind, don't forget to get out and look at vernal pools, because I think the critters are going to move tomorrow.
Oh.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to stop recording.